question. Tessa, is the boat back in the water yet?
We got our boat back in the water, and we were able to bob around slowly for 14 miles a couple weeks ago. We've got
Good.
that one this
Good
weekend.
for you.
Yeah.
I heard you haven't sailed past my house, so I don't know.
We have not again until July.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate your time again today. We last met in January. We've been on a quarterly frequency. At the end, we'll talk about the timing for our next meeting, which will be close to a quarterly frequency, but we're thinking about June, and so we'll touch on that as well. You have an agenda in front of you. We also have one more handout we'll use today during the meeting. And I think like we've done in the past, we'll cover the topics, but please chime in, provide input, feedback, and questions really at any time. Is there anything that anyone wanted to note before we just dive right in? All right, let's do it. So as it shows on our agenda, we are starting with the update on the Community Sounding Board, and we had our first meeting, and Tessa will walk us through that.
All right. We're happy to be back, and when we were with you last, it was right before we started the recruitment process for the Community Sounding Board, and that recruitment process occurred largely in February. We have explained before the purpose of the Community Sounding Board, and we'll go over that again today, but what we wanted to make sure that you folks were familiar with is our process to select the participants of the Community Sounding Board, just how we got from the applicants to those that were with us last Monday on April 8th, which was our first meeting. So we'll go through that, and after these couple of slides, please, we'll hold time for questions. So we had a great turnout. We received 69 unique responses from the community for those that were interested in participating in the Community Sounding Board, which is so great. There were a couple duplicates, but 69 are the number of applications that we meaningfully reviewed. You will see that we have two general indicators up here, or things to sort by. One was responses by interest. So when we went out to the community, we had 13 general categories to help understand why a certain applicant was applying to be on the Community Sounding Board and where their primary and secondary interests lie. So there was many interests in water quality, as you can see on the right hand of the screen, the natural environment, bird and wildlife habitat. But what we did see was that there was throughout the lot of applicants that there were primary interests in each category, which was great. And we also received applicants or applications from around the Olympia area. Most were from Olympia area, and there were some from Tumwater and Lacey and Thurston County. We expected the majority to be from Olympia, and I would say that we were pretty pleased with the geographic diversity that we saw. Okay, when we closed the selection process, we did a number of things to ultimately sort to our final group of participants. So the first 6 steps on this slide were completed by a neutral third-party facilitator. We felt that it was important that it wasn't done by somebody that was too close to the process, so that we were really reviewing the applications objectively. And so the first thing that we did is that we looked at the applications and we sorted to determine those applicants that represented an organization and those that were representing their personal interests. And those organizations that have been part of this project, we wanted to make sure that they certainly had a seat with us on the Community Sounding Board. So for example, CLIPA and DIRT, we absolutely wanted to make sure they had representations with us, or representatives with us, excuse me. And then following that initial sorting, we sorted for the primary interests. So we wanted to make sure that interests of each of the 13 categories that we had identified would be represented on the community sounding board. Again, this is all about having that diversity of interests, so natural environment and built environment. And then when we had done that sorting, our facilitator looked at the responses that the applicants provide as to why they were interested in participating in the community sounding board. And again, the purpose was, or the intent was to have the greatest diversity there. And we weren't focused on, does this applicant have a good deal of technical background, because we have a technical work group that we can use in that capacity, but rather we are really looking to have the community interests represented. Following those 3 steps, we went back to the geographic pool to ensure that we had good geographic diversity. So Thurston County was represented and Olympia was represented. And then we did our best to look at gender to make sure that we had, as well as we could, sort of deduce from names, a range for male and female participants. When we had done all that, we had our facilitator put forward a list of 22 candidates and moved those forward for enterprise services to consider. And we had really great discussion about that list of candidates, and ultimately 25 were selected to participate. Okay, so we had a charter that outlined to the participants the roles and responsibilities that we would expect the community sounding board to work within. It also clarified the authority and established very clearly that Enterprise Services was the convener, and that the community sounding board was convened so that we could receive input from that stakeholder group, but does not have a formal decision-making power. It summarizes what our outcomes are. So areas of agreement are great, but there is no requirement to reach consensus, because again, we do understand that there is diversity in interests. It established our operational protocols. For example, there's no quorum requirement. We had some good discussion around that during our meeting. And also that an alternate may be allowed to sit in for the representative of an organization, because we want to ensure that those organizational interests are always at the table with us. And then finally, we went over our standards, our expectations around group conduct. Okay, our first meeting, as I mentioned, was last Monday, and whoops. We started by providing a couple slides. I think we just went over about 4 or 5 slides to ensure that all participants really had a similar baseline knowledge of the project. We wanted to make sure we were all kind of starting out on a level playing field there. So spent some time on a project overview. That was also a good opportunity, sort of like an icebreaker. Some folks asked great questions, and we started to see the sounding board working together through those questions. And then we went through the charter that I just outlined in the last slide, and the participants reviewed those and provided their feedback on the charter. We had a couple minor changes that came forward from that discussion, but ultimately we all agreed on the charter and the protocol that was outlined within it. And then one of our most substantive discussion topics of the evening was the measurable evaluation process. We will go over that with you as our next agenda item, and we'll provide sort of more detailed input at that time, but generally what we're pleased to say is that we received a good response on that process that we'll use at the beginning of our EIS. And there were some great suggestions to us and observations, and ultimately it was just such a great exercise to see how thoughtful the community was being, and just the recognition that they were providing input and that we were not asking for a vote on what was being put forward. And then There is always an opportunity, as with all of our work group meetings, for public comment at the end, and we did not receive any public comments at the end of that meeting. Carrie, did you have anything to add on how that went?
No, we just so appreciate that there were that many people in the community that were interested in participating, and yeah, I thought it was a really positive, good first meeting. And just, I guess, I know you mentioned Clip and Dirt, the other organizations, the Olympia Downtown Association and the Thurston County Chamber both have representatives as well. Students from Evergreen and Sierra Club or something, but
Is the membership posted on the website?
It is.
Any other questions? That was kind of a high-level review, but, and like Tessa said, our next topic for today with you guys too is really to dive deep into the measurable evaluation process, that first step of our EIS work. So we'll go through that in detail. That's what Tessa reviewed with the community at this meeting as well. Okay.
Okay. Moving right along. Okay, so should I get started, Justin?
Yeah, I say let's dive in.
Alrighty, so we have developed what we are calling a measurable evaluation process. We sometimes call it internally MEP because measurable evaluation process is a mouthful. I have one, yeah. So you may hear me say MEP, but anyhow, we developed this process to assist our team in developing a range of alternatives for analysis, for comparing the alternatives, and ultimately for identifying a preferred alternative. And doing it in this way, through a measurable evaluation process, allows the project team and enterprise services to be transparent in that process and ensure that we are measuring the alternatives in an objective manner. Both of those things are important and will be carried forward with us as kind of pillars of our process throughout. So you will see on the flow chart that you're looking at that there are 3 steps to the measurable evaluation process. Step 1 is what we'll focus on today. Step 2 happens as part of the draft EIS, and step 3 occurs in the final. So those are quite a ways in the future, and we will be sure to come back to you when we're getting closer to those step 2 and step 3 processes. But ultimately, they worked together to help us get to a preferred alternative, but step 1 is our focus today. So essentially, in a nutshell, step 1 is where we get to look at everything that we have, are all alternatives and concept proposals that have been put forward. And we get to break them down to their component pieces and understand their feasibility and sustainability. And coming out of it, we will develop optimized versions of the alternatives using objective criteria. So let's talk now in more detail about how we do that. That's sort of the overview. Let me go through one. So you will see that we are, I'm going to point to the screen here. This orange color that you see at the top filter and then in the circle here are steps that incorporate or are based on public comment. So at the top, you will see that all alternatives and concept proposals identified in phase 1 and EIS scoping, we gather those to help us move into step 1, and ultimately they are filtered as part of our step 1 process. Again, it has always been important to recognize that there are just a number of ideas that are out there and that we have always been asked to look at them closely. And so this is the way that we do that. Step 1 will evaluate components of all primary alternatives and new concept proposals from phase 1 and EIS scoping. And the purpose of step 1 is to develop the optimized versions of a managed lake and estuary and hybrid alternative using objective evaluation criteria. This step 1 has the following benefits. I want to make sure I hit them all, so I'm going to reference my notes here. One is to avoid the potential to eliminate an alternative or an entire proposal because one or more of its components are not feasible or sustainable. And it screens, on the flip side of that, it screens and does eliminate components that don't have technical or regulatory feasibility or are not environmentally and economically sustainable, which are key elements of the project purpose and need. So once it's done that screening of those that are not feasible or sustainable, it compares the components that are, so it compares those that could be implemented to meet the project goals and develops an optimized version of each alternative from the components that are expected to best meet project goals. So here we say, what is the best approach to, for example, improving water quality? Let's carry that forward with us as a foundation of, for example, the managed lake. So doing that ensures responsible expenditure of finite project budget by limiting the detailed technical analyses to optimized versions of each alternative. And that point's especially important because the proposals and the variations of the proposals that we've seen in the past public processes, they don't vary significantly enough to result in substantial differences in the technical analyses. And so focusing on the optimized versions of alternatives, the very best approach to each version helps us to just have one best version of each one that is carried forward. Sorry, that was a little wordy. So coming out, so let's move into how we do this in a measurable way, step 1, and we'll come back to revisit step 2 and step 3.
I think I'd just add too, I'm sure you guys will remember at the end of phase 1 and even starting off in phase 2, there's interest in, like Tessa was referring to, the team and the EIS evaluating various alternatives or concept proposals. At the flip side, there's also been thoughtful comment that we've received, and I think has come forward even as part of the work groups, of being mindful of not carrying forward 11 alternatives into the EIS, and how to be efficient and spend wisely. So this is the approach that finds the best balance of both of those objectives that are somewhat at odds with each other.
Definitely, thank you. Okay, so as we mentioned, we would do this in an objective manner so that our work groups, our community stakeholders can really see how ultimately the sorting and screening and optimization has been completed. So the first thing that we've developed are the evaluation criteria. So we would look at each component of an alternative against these evaluation criteria. First, feasibility, and second, sustainability. And again, this is a look at the component alternatives. So we would evaluate each potential component of an alternative to determine whether it was technically feasible and regulatory, if it had regulatory feasibility. Let's go through what those mean now. And the first is technical feasibility. So really this is about, can we implement it? Is it possible to do that? So a component would be considered technically feasible if there's no apparent technical or logistical obstacles that would prevent it from being constructed and maintained. And if there is technical uncertainty, it's at an acceptable level based on current standard engineering practices. So various dredging techniques could be evaluated for their technical feasibility. And we would evaluate each of those components based on a rating scale of high, medium, and low. So for technical feasibility, if the component was to score high, it would essentially mean that it appears to be technically feasible. A medium may mean that it may be technically feasible. There could be some obstacles that have been identified, and low, of course, is, it has an unacceptable level of technical uncertainty.
Can I ask a quick question? Now,
It
Is
is,
it us, is it the, what you call it, the community sounding board? I mean, I'm just curious.
it is the EIS project team, so that's the interdisciplinary group of consultants along with enterprise services.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
And I was just gonna jump in to say that we will also post these slides to the project website so that you'll have this content as well. And when we coordinate, we can also transmit those via email to let you know when we post it, and you'll have the PDF so that you'll have the documentation.
All right, so the next is regulatory feasibility. So first we've determined, can this approach even be implemented? That's the first question. And the second one is, can it be permitted? So regulatory feasibility. So we would look at each component and give it a rating, high, medium, or low, if really related to regulatory feasibility. And we define that as permits and approvals could be secured within the project schedule and budget, and it's within enterprise services jurisdiction to implement. And there are no legal protections on land or other similar restrictions that could affect the feasibility. Each component would get a rating to help us understand how they're shaking out. And importantly, in this one, we have the technical work group that we can reach into as needed to help us understand if we have questions about, can we permit this? Is it that feasibility that we're looking at? So that is our initial screening of the components. Then we go into sustainability. Again, this has been defined in the project purpose and need as a long-term management plan should have environmental and economic sustainability. So we would look at components related to these. We have defined environmental sustainability as a component will support an environmentally sustainable outcome if it would provide net environmental benefits over a 30-year horizon and considering relative contribution to project goals. So here, a high rating would mean the component appears to provide the most environmental benefits relative to the other potential approaches. On the flip side, low here would be it appears to provide the fewest environmental benefit relative to other environmental approaches. And you'll note that we have unknown in this category. And the reason that we have unknown is because for sustainability, we are looking at the potential components relative to each other. So is this approach more or less sustainable than that approach? It's a relative rating. So unknown is brought in if there's only one potential approach that's been put forward.
Is it okay to add, I was just thinking about your question, when Tessa is saying we, or the development of the evaluation criteria, that's really developed across our interdisciplinary team. So ESA is a prime teaming partner, and lead for the EIS. So we are drawing from our partners, our team's experience on other EIS projects. We've also therefore been connecting with the more design engineering arm of our team and the natural environment arm of our team and the economist arm of our team. So that's how these were developed. And Tessa will keep going walk through this. I just thought that context, and we're doing this evaluation and screening like Tessa was describing before the technical analysis of the EIS, the nitty gritty, right? So that's why there's that comparison across different concepts to help kind of funnel that.
So that sounds vaguely like a ranking. And so would it be your expectation, since you're comparing alternatives relative to each other, would you expect that there would be any two that would result in the same rating scale? So in other words, if you had three options, would you have a high, a medium, and a low?
Yes, that is,
As opposed to two high and one low, or?
yes, right now we are anticipating that they would be relative, so high, medium, and low. However, if there are more than three, we could end up with, that redundancy there. And in that case, we would take those, I mean, for the highs, we would want to look at those to see which one is the highest.
And again,
Because-
these are, and just really quick, you had mentioned ranking of alternatives. These are ranking of components of the alternatives, which Tessa will keep going, and that'll help clarify a little bit. So it's not at this time saying, is an estuary or a hybrid or a lake, how do they rank? It's the subcomponents that address each specific topic.
Jeff, are you also asking that if they're somewhat equal in technical, somewhat equal in economic sustainability, what would be the tiebreaker?
That would be a logical follow-up, yes. I mean, it's proceed, and we can have this more involved conversation later.
But this is exactly what we're trying to get to, and there are 2 more slides that'll hopefully help to explain some of that. But when this all boils down, the purpose is to find the best approach for meeting each of our goals, which is water quality, sediment management, ecological functions, and community use. And we'll show you how this all plays together at the end. So the last evaluation criteria to which we would look at our various components is the economic sustainability. And so a component, this is our definition for that evaluation criteria, essentially that a component will support an economically sustainable outcome if it would be cost effective in meeting the project goal. And a proposed approach is considered cost effective if its present value life cycle costs over a 30-year time horizon are low relative to the other proposed approaches within that same project component. So, our high rating here is it appears to be the most cost effective in achieving the project goal relative to the other potential approaches. So I'm just going to move on to the next 2 slides, and we can come back with questions on these as needed. Following that evaluation, we have our evaluation outcomes. And again, the purpose of this is to optimize an alternative with the best components in each category. And so we would have an overall rating. I'm gonna switch to my notes here to make sure I get all of them. Our overall rating, which is that we go through a completed matrix, and green generally indicates that the project component has achieved the highest rating. We're thinking that this is really the best way to achieve, let's say, water quality, overall improvements to water quality. On the flip side, orange is a component that did not score well against those evaluation criteria that we just went over. Next to the green, you will likely see a check mark. So those components that have scored well in achieving the project goals would be selected to become an optimized alternative that would then move into the technical analysis as part of the draft EIS. And again, an optimized alternative would be developed for each, the managed lake, the estuary, and the hybrid. There would be one for each. That last bar of the evaluation outcome, the component rating confirmed, is to say that as we get into the technical analyses, there might be some new information that becomes available. Our general initial assumptions may have changed, and so we want to just ensure that we always revisit those, and we have the opportunity to come back if things need to be adjusted to do that. So here's how it all comes together. This is an example of what we're calling the step 1 matrix or table. We'll run through this quickly and then provide an example or 2. So on the left column, you'll see our project goals: water quality, sediment management, ecological functions, and community use. The project components are those approaches or components that have been put forward as part of each of the alternatives to satisfy that project goal. Our job will be to sort through the various alternatives and concept proposals that have been put forward to populate that column and say, here are all the different ways that we know of or that the community and stakeholders have put forward to do this. The proposed approach would be populated with the way to do that. So, for example, you'll see in that first column, passive water quality improvements. One of the proposed approaches that have been put forward to do that under a managed lake scenario is to transition the south and middle basins to wetlands. That has been part of, or is part of, several different alternatives and concepts that have been put forward. If we were to evaluate that against the evaluation criteria, we may see that has a high degree of technical feasibility and could be permitted. It may also score well in environmental and economic sustainability. And so if it, compared to the other potential passive ways to improve water quality, is the one that fares best under a managed lake, it could become part of an optimized alternative. We would do that, again, for each of the project components. And this table is important to, again, get back to the purpose or the objective of being transparent through this process. The last thing I'll note is that there would be a table like this completed for each of the optimized alternatives. So again, the proposed approaches are only compared to those of the other variations. So managed lake, we only look at potential ways to do these things for managed lake, similar to estuary. It's not a comparison across the alternatives.
So the example you gave of a managed lake, one component of the managed lake might be turning the south basins into wetlands. That component of turning the south basins into wetlands could be a component of other alternatives, right?
Could be.
For example, the estuary restoration.
Could be, yes, and that is one of the comments that we got during the community sounding board. One of the questions they asked us is, we understand that you're looking kind of siloed first at what's the best way to optimize each alternative, but if there's a good idea that comes forward in one alternative, could there be cross-pollination if it made sense? And so that's something that we were taking back to the team and looking further into.
So your component by component analysis allows you to plug those into whichever alternative, potentially.
If it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we will also be taking this forward tomorrow to the technical work group, which in addition to your staff also has the agency representatives that are involved with project permitting. So it allows us to connect with them around the feasibility questions and the regulatory feasibility. And you folks know that WDFW and DNR and Ecology are all members of the technical work group. We've asked the Corps if they can participate, and the Corps has said that they would participate in the technical work group on a topic-by-topic as-needed basis when it falls in the Corps' purview due to their resource focus and limitations. And so they will be with us tomorrow as well, so that we can go through this with them and ask that question of how regulatory feasibility is defined as well, in addition to the whole concept.
So you have, go ahead.
Oh, so, to follow up, so because conceivably, some components will, popularize other types of alternatives, conceivably, you could have an additional alternatives, or would it just be, you would make sure that one of the alternatives includes some of these, better component check marks? Which one of those? I mean, because I could see that you have, okay, if you had, say 4, I'm just throwing that out, but you're taking a little bit of this component, a little bit of this, and conceivably you could have 5 alternatives, but you're not. That would be still sticking with the one alternative that makes sense, that would help improve all of it. Is that correct? You see what I'm asking?
I think so, yeah. Do you want to start, or do you want me to?
I think either way, I guess, jump in here too, but to the first, one part of your question, I think the direct answer is we would still stick with the key for the no action lake estuary hybrid.
Okay.
Although there is the cross-pollination potential, and the whole goal is to optimize each alternative, optimize the components within a given alternative, we won't be mixing and matching to the point that you get kind of a weird meld at the end of things that don't make sense. In
Right,
case
yeah.
that your concern was like, whoa, this could get interesting. So it really is also that technical, practical application of if there is a component that makes good sense to apply, like Tessa's example of water quality, or maybe there's invasive species management that has a component that is applicable across. That's something that might be practical, technically feasible, logical, but it won't be kind of creating that weird
Other
morph
alternative.
of something. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But
That sounds great. I agree.
So my question, are these the actual components that, all of them that you're gonna use to evaluate these elements then, or the goals?
These project components are general categories, component categories based on a sort of an initial review of the alternatives. They would be customized and unique to, the managed lake table and the estuary table. There may be components that are different as you look at the alternatives individually. And so this is a sort of general example that will be further refined and added to as we get into this process. We have not started to undertake or evaluate, complete this step. We wanted to first bring it forward to the sounding board and to the work groups.
But it'll get more granular for the alternative.
Okay, yeah, and, because what I don't see up there is managing the sediment in the watershed, for example, source control as a way to try and limit the amount of sediment that's coming down. I don't know if that is part of this ongoing sediment control element that you listed here or not, but it seems like that is one way to try and reduce the amount of sediment loading into the system. And of course, water quality is defined a number of ways. We have, sediment and DO problems, nutrient problems. So
That's right.
I'm not sure, that can be peeled apart in multiple ways.
That's exactly right. You're correct. Yep.
And may I answer briefly to that? If sediment management upstream has been part of an alternative or concept proposal that has been put forward, we would anticipate that it would be populated on one of these alternatives. However, it would still go through the same evaluation criteria, and we'd have to ask, is this within enterprise services jurisdiction, as part of the regulatory feasibility, and kind of rate it all there. But I think that you make a good point as what's getting put on there, and that's all public knowledge based on what's been put forward.
Yeah, I just put that out because that's part of the TMDL,
Yeah.
is to manage that. So kind of based on what Pete's question is, so what I'm imagining, maybe I'm not picturing this correctly, is like, for instance, under water quality, when we say passive water quality improvements, there could be a number of sublines underneath that component, or the project components itself. It could be sub-project components that kind of add up to that water quality improvement line. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
Point of clarification for me, excuse me. The eval process for the EIS is done by technical folks within DES?
No, within our project.
Within your, okay. And then before we get too far from the community sounding board, do they have any foot in the door into this process?
Could you say that again? Do they have any what?
Do they have any input into this process, into the process for the evaluation of the EIS?
We did ask them, we asked them the global question, how do you feel about this approach, about breaking things down, looking at their components and making the best version? And generally their response was positive. They agreed that, we should be, or we found sort of general consensus about moving forward. We will be relying on our technical experts to actually complete this step, though.
We get feedback from them, but they're not involved in this.
Right,
Okay.
right. approaches, right? So for example, the dredging summary, the different approaches under a managed lake, that is different than the different approaches under an estuary or a hybrid alternative. And so that's how you'd see some of these tables start to vary in
Yep.
the ways they do it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Yeah, well, the dredge material disposal will be out in Butternut, we're just gonna put it all down in there. There you go.
Save the marine terminal from sea level rise.
Build it right up, build it right up.
Wait, didn't we do that before?
So I do have a different question. On your earlier slide, you showed a 30-year time frame. How does that compare to the earlier reports that we did? Is that the time frame we used earlier, or is it different?
I'm trying to remember what I should do too. Maybe it was 30 years.
I wouldn't be able to say right now, I'd have to get back to you on
I'll go
that.
back and look. As you can imagine, the definition for sustainability was something that the team coordinated quite a bit on. And then when you look at sustainability, how to define that within the context of this objective, and then also the years associated with that. So part of our review and dialogue in defining 30 years was both continuity or consistency with the level of technical, or time horizon of technical evaluation on other EIS projects, kind of that consistency, and then also what's appropriate, thinking about the economic side of things. We looked at what's commonly used in feasibility studies, evaluation of alternatives, and kind of shared funding type approaches. So we ultimately, across disciplines, coordinated in 30 years, was where the team landed on their recommendation. But I'm just drawing a blank at the moment relative to the clamp work and alternatives analysis and like dredging disposal costs, if it was 30 or if it was 50. I'd have to go back and double check.
Yeah, and I can't remember. We had that chart in the previous report that we worked on. I can't remember the time frame that was under. I mean, I can understand once you get, if you're doing a present worth analysis, you really, once you get out 30 years, it's pretty meaningless at that point. I don't know on the environmental sustainability side of things, this 30 years is the right horizon or not, so.
One of the things that we asked our leads was, one, does it cover the establishment period? And their answer to that was generally yes. And then on the SEPA side, we wanted to avoid going so far that any of the initial review would be speculative. And so that was a key point for us to targeting that 30-year window.
Well, that would be 2050 roughly, which is about what we're doing for climate. The sea level rise report for downtown
We
Lakeview.
looked
So
at that too, kind of thinking about the work that's being done on projections with sea level rise, and that's a discipline and evaluation, climate change and sea level rise within the EIS as well.
So, tell me that you're not boiling down economic sustainability to just cost. That seems to be what you're implying up there, is that sustainability is merely a ranking of life cycle costs.
I wish I had the email right in front of me, but no, we are not just boiling it down to cost. What we worked with our economists on this, and those that would be leading the economic analysis. And one key point that they made was that it looks at the benefits, the relative benefits from costs as well. And so it's a holistic look on cost and essentially return.
Okay, so I'm not an economist, I'm actually a scientist, but I'm thinking of it in terms of financing. In other words, I could envision scenarios where the lowest cost strategy is not the easiest to pay for.
Right.
So is that accounted for in your characterization?
The short answer would be yes. And that has been a discussion that has been led by that this isn't just what is our upfront cost and whatever is the lowest there scores, the best in the evaluation. It is to say, what is the cost? What are the benefits that are realized from those costs? How does that transition over time? And I am also not an economist, and so that's sort of where my ability to explain it stops.
I would think an economist would also look at what kind of economic draw is it to the region, to the area as well, whatever the option is. Does it bring economy to downtown, or does it bring economy to Thurston?
That's a great point, and so that is essentially the next step. When we have developed or optimized our alternatives, and we have well-defined optimized alternatives that move into technical analyses, that's where that look happens. And so what, tourism-related impacts or benefits to the economy, what does that look like per alternative?
And it's just
In that comparison
no
there.
pun intended, but it's all downstream, there's a ripple effect then at that point.
Exactly, and it gets into the economic analysis as well.
Yeah.
Since there's an interest in this one particular subject, and since we don't have a good definition, and I think there are a lot of questions that need to get answered about that.
Well, I think we have a good definition of it, but we definitely, maybe where you were going is, we can also follow up with, in
Exactly.
response to some of the questions
Yeah.
that provide some of the underpinnings on the terminology.
Thank you.
Perfect, we'll definitely do that. This is where, economists are actually quite brilliant when you talk to them. You're like, ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you work with the EDC then, the Economic Development Council of the county?
We haven't reached out to that group or talked about that. That's a good question though.
Any other questions on this step one before we circle back and just do a high clip of step two and step three? See, did you have anything to say before we just
No.
revisited the flow chart?
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so just a quick revisit here. Again, our outcome of completing step one, so those completed tables for each of the alternatives, the managed lake, the hybrid, and the estuary, those optimized versions move into the technical analyses. And so step two is really to evaluate the potential impacts and benefits of those alternatives. And the measurable evaluation process will be about how do we compare those impacts and benefits in an objective way. And so we will use the results of the technical analyses and measure alternatives against discipline-specific significance criteria and present that in a comparative summary of the impacts and benefits of the alternatives, a summary that can be understood how we would look at some things that may be very different, like, for example, visual quality. The results of that step will be provided in the draft EIS, upon which all stakeholders and community will have the opportunity to comment. And then in the final environmental impact statement, those comments will be reviewed by the project team, and ultimately the alternatives will be rescreened and brought back to the initial project purpose and need and the goals within those to see which has the greatest ability to achieve the project goals. So the outcome of the last step in our process will be the identification of that preferred alternative that does best meet the project purpose and needs statement and the goals that are provided in that box in the flowchart.
And like Tessa mentioned in step two, where the technical analysis are measured against the discipline-specific significance criteria, that's another touch point that we come to you with the development of those criteria and the approach for doing that. So really our goal is, as we walk through kind of the systematic SEPA EIS roadmap, we continue to have these touch points with you where you're up to speed on how we're approaching it and can provide kind of the input and guidance or ask good questions that help us shape and maybe fine tune some of what we're doing. All right. If as that is kind of seeping in there, I know it's a lot that we kind of roll out. Just jump in if anything else comes to mind. But for now, we'll move on to our next item. And this is actually Carrie to describe the status of the third-party review work that she's been undertaking regarding a few of the technical disciplines.
Great, thank you. So something that we've heard pretty consistently as we've been going through this process is that we should consider having certain technical disciplines reviewed by independent third-party experts. And we agree with that. I think it's really important to ensure that the work is conducted using industry-recognized best practices, and also that it provides a reasonable level of analysis to allow us to compare the alternatives. So I, about a month ago, I think, sent out an email to all of the members of our 3 work groups and asked for recommendations, anyone that you may have heard of or worked with outside of this area that you could recommend for reviewers. So thank you to those of you who sent back recommendations, or your staff, some of your staff sent recommendations as well. We'll be looking for reviewers who are recognized technical experts in their discipline, who are neutral and objective. So when we say that, we've asked for people who don't have connections with Thurston County or the Capital Lake Deschutes estuary. So we're not looking for folks who have done reports on Capital Lake, who participated in CLAMP or the TMDL. We really wanted people who can give us a fresh look and provide that neutrality. So the third-party review will be used to check the reasonableness of the project team assumptions, and will peer review the methodologies and the conclusions then.
Are you still looking for more people, or have you got them?
I think at this point we're pretty good. We'll see what we get for applications. But we're looking for 2 folks in each of 3 disciplines. So we picked water quality, hydrodynamics, and sediment transport modeling, and economics. Those 3 we felt like were really critical to the evaluation against the project goals, and also could be more heavily scrutinized, could be controversial or has been controversial in the past. So once we get that group together, we will ask them to do a review at 2 points. One, they will look at the methodology memoranda that the project team is putting together. That will happen over the next few months. Water quality will be done first. We've kind of got that on the fast track because we want to get out and start water quality sampling. And then we'll also get going on the economics and the modeling. So that will, review will take place first. And then when the technical discipline reports are in draft form in 2020, those same folks will do a second review and review the analysis and provide input on that. They will also be on call for us, so if our team member, as they're doing the analysis, if questions come up and they would like to be able to run some things by them, we'll have them on call for that as well. Of the recommendations I got, I did get a good number. There were a few that had done some of the CLAMP reports or had done reviews for the TMDL, so I didn't contact those folks, but we ended up with a pretty good group. I think I had 9 or 10 in water quality, gosh, I think 14 or 15 in modeling, and most of those folks in both of those disciplines were either from universities or federal agencies. So so USGS, the Army Corps of Engineers. In economics, we did have some private firms just because of the difference in that discipline. So the water quality applications are due today, so we'll get busy reviewing those this week. And then by the end of next week, we'll see what comes in for the modeling and for economics. But yeah, we're really excited to have this, this third-party look at the process, and so yeah, I think it'll be a good benefit. Are there any questions?
Great that you're doing that. It's gonna strengthen, I think, I mean, I trust you guys, but I think that it will beef up the potential for community support, because not everybody's gonna see the outcome that they're hoping for. And if we have independent outside reviewers, that makes it stronger.
Well, and we really want that input too. We want the process to be strong. So, you know, there's kind of a mix, some from within Washington State and some outside the state.
I think it's particularly beneficial or helpful in this EIS because like we've all talked about, the alternatives vary so much. It isn't something where it's just shades of gray. I think that's where that review adds even more value.
If I come up with an economist, should I forward his or her name to you, or
Yes,
To whom?
send it to
Carrie
me.
would be
Okay.
perfect.
to thank you?
So, none of these are hydrogeologists, though, correct?
No hydrogeologist. Water quality has some limnologists, and then sediment transport modeling, probably not hydrogeologists, I think, in training. Or is there something in particular you were thinking about for that?
Well, only because, at DNR, I know there's several hydrogeologists, whether or not they would be involved or not, I don't know, but it does make a difference in how, soils are transported and what the difference of sediments and things, but I don't know, maybe it'll be covered under those connected with water
I
quality.
think there's some geomorphologists, to the point you're making, I think, to bring that level of expertise. Yeah. That's a good point. All right. So the next thing we wanted to cover, as you guys know, we were closing out the scoping report, working on our team's EIS scope and all of that fun stuff. So this is really with the with the measurable evaluation process. We are also running a number of things, kind of kicking off and getting out of the gates. So we wanted to provide an update on the items that are listed below under the overview of next steps on the technical analysis. And see if you guys had any questions. The first one is we wanted to touch on the water quality methodology. And that's an item and topic, like Carrie mentioned, that work is kind of one of the first out of the gates because we want to get going on water quality sampling and monitoring. So that methodology memo that Carrie referred to for third-party review is in preparation now. The methodology or approach to the technical analysis is something that we will be reviewing in detail tomorrow with the technical work group. And so this gives you kind of the overview of what that methodology really looks like, and then we can answer any questions as well. One of the things with the methodology for this EIS in water quality is that our team is able to rely heavily on existing data and previous analysis to define and capture existing conditions as required under SEPA and an EIS. So that is a thing that we're fortunate to have. The Lower Deschutes watershed, Capitol Lake, Bud Inlet has a wealth of water quality information and data. However, we do want to update some of those data and analysis that our team thinks is appropriate. So with this high level of available data, we're really able to kind of get out of the gate strong with that. We have, kind of starting in December and into January, reached out to your folks' technical staff who have been wonderful in providing access to Thurston County's water quality monitoring data or the city ecology, Tumwater, everyone has just been great. We're doing that, one, to make sure that we don't miss any existing. And then this is kind of a list to go through our upcoming project activities, and jump in if I forget or miss anything here. What we have at the top, we're describing that we're working on developing methodologies for the following disciplines, and we really do have a lot kicking off running right now. So we're working on those methodologies for the EIS approach to hydrodynamic and sediment transport modeling and economics. Those are the other two that will undergo third-party review. Sediment quality, that sediment quality is including the collection of sediment cores from Capitol Lake this fall, so that has additional sample collection and chemical testing. Aquatic invasive species, land use, shorelines and recreation, and last but not least, wetlands, vegetation, and fish and wildlife. That's a big bucket. We'll touch on this in a minute for our upcoming meeting, but our next step is when we meet with you again, we would love to come and overview these methodologies in detail with you as well, to see what you think and solicit your feedback as well as the technical work group. So we're working on those. We are continuing to review existing data and background documents. The technical work group folks have been wonderful in sharing information, even to the point of Excel files of data that makes it more efficient for our team. As those technical leads continue, we might be reaching back out to your folks with follow-up questions or asking for a little bit more data if they have it. Again, just in the objective of being as efficient as we can and not missing anything. We are undertaking new data collection activities as well, where we see there was real benefit in filling data gaps or confirming current conditions. So one of those items, we are working to conduct a bathymetric survey of Capitol Lake. The last survey that was done was part of Enterprise Services work as part of the permitting recommendations report in 2013. That was a bathymetric survey of all the 3 basins. So we're working and planning to do that soon. We would love to be doing it this month, but again, with the oil spill that happened and ecology spill response and restricted access to even survey on the lake, it'll probably be the first week in June, is what it sounds like.
Isn't bathymetric depth surveying the depth?
That's exactly right, yep. And really that is critical, I'm sure I'm stating the obvious. It'll let us understand how much sediment has come into the lake basins from 2013 to 2019. And really assess that general kind of rule of thumb we've all heard of 35,000 cubic yards a year. It'll also tell us where it's being deposited, and that will be the new surface that goes into the sediment transport modeling that also factors into the volumes of dredging and disposal for conceptual design. So our technical people are just itching for that survey. So that's in the works. The water quality sampling, like I mentioned, within Capitol Lake. And then the sediment coring is on the docket for the fall, but we're working with our team on that as well. And then potential recreational surveys, which I'll turn over to you if you want to describe that.
No, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And so this is all about getting an understanding of existing conditions. So how are people using the resource? Where are they coming from? That latter point would be important data to then feed into the economic analysis. So the question has been, is this a tourist draw, and how would the alternatives change or affect that? And so we are working to understand what sort of data we would like to obtain from those surveys and how we would collect it, and then we would want to be out there collecting that data through the in-person interviews, come peak summer months,
Yeah, exactly.
starting then at least.
And tying back to the terminology we had on the agenda, the update on hydrodynamic and sediment transport modeling methodology, we're working on the methodology as part of that. In addition to a new bathy survey, we have also had coordination calls with USGS, which we're looking to schedule, I think, another one. And that's been really great for the sediment transport modeling leads on our team to connect with those USGS folks that did the modeling in the past and talk about where is the best bang for your buck on where to look technically, what to evaluate data, lessons learned, sharing their input. And so so that's something that we've also, with Carrie's assistance and helping us connect with the right folks, have been able to make sure, again, just in theory, our eyes are always wide open and learning the best we can from what people have done in the past. And then we're also coordinating a consultant team site visit that helps with some recon relative to existing conditions, vegetation, wildlife, things of that nature. Yeah. Mhm.
How are you conducting recreational surveys, considering there are multiple types of recreation that are actually restricted at this point?
That is, so we internally are, I guess, putting our heads together on that beginning later this month, and we can let you know sort of the line of questions that we developed. Those aren't developed yet. I guess this is to say that it's work that's coming up in this next quarter.
It's one of the questions the team is evaluating with those restrictions to active use right now.
Otherwise, it's potential. Potential. What could it be? What did it used to be?
Yeah.
Whether it be nature trails through an estuary or canoeing, who knows?
How would you like to use it? How have you used it historically? What are your values related to recreation? Where you came from, that's an important one, like I mentioned, for to feedback to economics. But
That's really economic, yeah, it's the economist.
Exactly.
So, given that a majority of the modeling would be out in the bay, I would assume, as far as predicting where the sediment is going to go,
Under the open system, that's correct, yeah.
where, is there gonna be any work done to determine what current sediment accumulation areas are? I know with some modeling done to predict that. I know any verification testing or surveys done out in the bay to,
That's a great question. We have in our agency coordination with both the Army Corps and the port, been able to access bathymetric surveys. So we don't have a perfect answer in terms of a model that says, here's how sediment deposition has changed in Lower Bud in the last 5 years, 10 years. But we do have access to the Corps' past bathymetric surveys for the navigation channel to see how some of that area has changed over time. So we are connecting and looking at what existing information is out in Lower Bud that helps us understand sediment deposition, and that's definitely something that the sediment hydrodynamic lead is assessing right now as well.
Going back to Jeff's question, though, I would imagine that, I'm just presuming, potential recreational survey is not limited to the lake, it would be also into the sound, what additions or expansions or eliminating of recreational opportunities or limiting of recreational opportunities would be around West Bay, East Bay, and the Port as well.
We would be identifying those locations, and yes, I anticipate that it wouldn't just be limited to Heritage Park and the immediate area.
So, and I know you're checking for barometrics issues, even for sediment is in the sound. Have you contacted a lot about, we have a pipeline that goes right out into the sound, which, are you going to do any kind of reaching out for sampling on water quality issues for what we're putting there, or, I'm just curious.
It's a good question. We definitely connected with your team. We've talked about some water quality information and some odor studies. I think that Lot has done in the past that would be helpful for our team. We don't anticipate or have in our scope any water quality sampling to be done in Bud Inlet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just jotting down a note here. These are good questions. Okay. Oh, well, I should have had that up. But anyway. Anything else that you guys have on that, or questions or comments? We're happy to take them, and we really do circle back to our team members.
So will these slides be available to the public online?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. We will make sure to do that. Absolutely.
I'm exceedingly impressed with the work you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. We really appreciate
The
that.
depth and the scope, I'm very impressed with it.
Thank you.
It's a pretty amazing opportunity to be working on this project. Tessa is phenomenal at tracking everything, but it is fascinating how much everything is interconnected. And just,
It's very complex.
it's not boring.
No.
All right, so that gets us to our next meeting. Tessa and I were noodling over the timing that made the most sense, and we want to make sure that it fits within where we think we're going to be at in the technical analysis, that we can bring you substantive content. The measurable evaluation process is significant. That's how we really are walking into the EIS and how we are funneling and bringing options forward or alternatives. So our thought is, given where we anticipate we will be with those other, the methodologies for the other disciplines, which also that list we looked at is a pretty significant list of those key disciplines. We think it makes the most sense to try to meet with you again in June. That's a little bit more frequent or closer in time than the normal 3-month quarterly cycle. That doesn't mean we're going to try to meet with you every 2 months, don't worry. But we will kind of shift our meetings a little bit to best fit the workflow so we can bring you good content and also get your feedback in time that it can plug into the methodologies. Like we've mentioned, I know numerous times, we're meeting with the technical work group tomorrow. We are not meeting with the funding and governance work group in this series. We wanted to get further with our economist teaming partner on the methodology for the economic analysis and get their expertise and brain going to help them, the funding and governance being them, on their objective for shared funding and governance model work. So we deferred the meeting with funding and governance until the next series. So given all of those things, we really landed on June being the best time. And we also thought about that maybe being better before we get into July and summer vacation. vacations and people being out of the office. So we think it works. So the funding and governance work group meeting is scheduled in June for June 7th at 9 a.m. We love to have the work group meetings fall pretty close, within a few days of each other if possible. It's a nice touch point that we get to tell you what other people thought and vice versa. So the options we have on the table for either our technical and executive that we're looking at, I might start because I already know your calendar and see if these are best. Let's see if this works by just like the stars aligning today. We would love to see if we could meet with you on either June 10th or June 13th. And it seems to work best with, I know you guys are busy folks, to keep to either a 9 to 11 time slot or a 1 to 3 time slot. So I imagine we would try to look for either one of those on the 10th or 13th. And I can send out a doodle poll as well. That might totally be good. It's just nice sometimes to know, like with Commissioner Hutchings, we knew a couple dates were viable, so it helps us winnow it down.
10th would work best for me, but
I vote for the 13th.
The 10th's better for me in the morning, but the 13th, it works also. As long as it,
What about you, Jeff? Do you have a preference or?
Not at this time.
Well, I didn't know if you were gonna say, I'm in Hawaii, good luck. So, that's wonderful, so Jeff could make,
I could work on that.
doesn't that sound nice?
What
That's
do you
just-
say, Pete, about
It's gonna be hot.
That's right.
well, I'm supposed to go up to the police academy to attend the graduation of one of our new police officers.
morning, afternoon?
It
Just use
goes,
today.
yeah, it goes most of the day. They
Yeah.
drive up there and back. But I mean, I can, if that's the only day available, I can make it work. I'll just not go to that.
I could do the 10th, that's eval week, so the 13th works a lot better. I could do it.
Afternoon or morning?
Yeah, is there a preference that works better for you? If we land on the 10th, what would be your preferred?
You said morning's fine.
Morning would work okay.
Yeah, but the 13th would be a lot better for me.
All right, what I might do, because we also don't have Mayor Selby with us today, and I know that Lindsay will help us with your calendar, I'll go ahead and send the doodle poll, but this is helpful. I'll focus on these 2 days, and Tessa and I can also look at the calendar and see if there might be one more day just in case that helps with people, because we know that you're trying to balance a lot. And I'm sure that we'll have a laundry list of things to come forward to you, but really those methodologies are what we'd like to preview or get your input. And then our next item, this is a placeholder we just have on roundtable feedback. So this is opening it to anything and, you know, information you'd want to share, constructive criticism, anything that you would like. I would just like to say a couple executives did ask about reviewing materials in advance. And I think that maybe we can think about that relative to the next meeting and methodologies if we're able to be far enough in our technical work to bring forward materials and send them to you in a few days in advance so you can really digest them and then we can walk through it together. So I feel like that's a feedback that seems to be good. But anything else, please let us know.
So my question was, is the spill cleanup affected this, or the fact that the spill occurred, affected the scope of what you're doing? Obviously, it sounds like it's affected the timing a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you getting any benefit from it in terms of the work that they're doing out
No.
there? So,
I mean, I guess I was being a little, I should be more serious. So I guess the thing that could be helpful is that they are doing shoreline sampling. And data is still data. We know that it'll be influenced and that Ecology's objective is to target their cleanup activities and confirm cleanup. But that's still data that might be helpful for us to understand some of that southern or shoreline area really. The chemical analyte that they will focus for, the analytical list, is more focused because it's tailoring those PCBs and hydrocarbons, I would
Right.
guess, versus the sediment coring and sampling effort that we are planning on doing in the fall is more comprehensive. We want to understand the full range of chemical quality. So we will be testing for PCBs and can absolutely, will share that data with ecology, submit it to EAM, but we'll be also testing for metals and dioxins and furans and a bunch of other chemicals. So I think that we'll definitely look for data that will come out of their process. But besides that, the objectives, they're just so much more focused to their task at hand that there's not too much of a chance for us to have some synergy or overlapping.
What about testing for PHAS on post, which tends to be used in kind of cleanup types of things, which is not good because it stays in the, I'm just curious.
You know, that's something that hasn't been raised yet. We haven't, we do have a point of contact with ecology who is leading the spill response, and so we will ask her about maybe the methodology that the contractor ecology is using for the cleanup, what methods or chemicals they may be applying, just so we know if there is the potential for that to influence or be an artifact relative to our sampling program.
Okay.
That's a really good point. Okay. Anything else that you guys have thoughts on?
So, just to be clear, I heard you say that the Army Corps is attending tomorrow's meeting,
Yep, that's right.
and their role there is just going to be listening, advisory, giving us input.
Great question. They will be in the technical work group on equal footing or capacity to the other work group members, which means that they have, every opportunity. We'd love to hear input from them. And I think all of the state and federal agencies, particularly on the regulatory feasibility definition and approach that Tessa described, that's what we're really looking on, and that's where the Corps' purview for future permitting comes in. So their capacity will be equal to the other work group members. But I guess with all of them, kind of that advisory capacity, yeah. That's a good question. I think that, I think that allows us to open it up for public comments. If there is anyone today that has any comments on what we went through that you'd like to share.
Just want to thank you for finishing up in an hour and a half.
Thank you, Steve.
That's because they're so organized.
Yeah, and we're fast talkers. Yeah, when it's just the two of us.
And a small group.
Yeah, small group.
So, when you guys are evaluating all these things, is there some kind of climate change factor going into these different alternative analysis? So what's going to happen in terms of sea level rise, water in the river, temperature, those kinds of things that we know we're facing right now?
Yeah, yes, the short answer. Do you want to take that? It is a discipline.
The sea level rise will be one of the key disciplines that we review each alternative against in the as part of the technical analysis in the draft EIS. So it really starts to come into play in that step 2 in the EIS process, whereas this step 1 is assembling the different features.
Okay, I just wanted to know that I knew you were thinking about it, but I didn't know where it was coming from.
Right.
Also, you talked about one of the solutions for sediment management being wetlands in the South Basin, South and Middle Basin. This has to do with climate change too. Carbon sequestration in freshwater wetlands is different than in saltwater wetlands or tidal marshes. So will you look at the value of each one of those types of wetlands and what would be best in terms of meeting any kind of greenhouse gas emission mitigation, sequestration, like blue carbon issues, for instance?
I know it's hard to hear this answer a couple times in in the same meeting, that we're developing our methodologies for
Okay.
these disciplines right now. And wetlands and vegetation is one where there would be the interplay, sea level rise. The methodology for that is developed a bit later. And so I just want to make sure I can defer to our technical leads on those questions and get back to you when we have.
Okay, that's fine, I'm putting it out there.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is the sediment management process into what could be a restored estuary and how that sediment might help with capping toxic sites that are there. And how over time that would build into cleaner sediment for, that's it. I just want to mention those three things.
Nope, got it.
Certainly on the radar.
And thank you. You guys are doing a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that might mean we call it. Thank
This is
you all
cool.
so much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks for your time last week for the phone calls to prepare for this.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
really- That really helped.
And I think we'll just continue with those briefings
Yeah.
and hold those time slots. They seem to most of the time work for someone or another. And then our homework items out of this, we'll follow up with some questions particularly on economic sustainability. That is, to be honest, a tough one, to make sure we're thinking about that in the best way. We will also send out the meeting documentation in draft form so you can review how we've captured things. As part of that, we'll transmit these slides to you, and they'll also be posted to the website with the meeting documentation and available to the public. And then we'll follow up with a doodle poll for